Excuse me? Okay. Nah, all right. See there? See there? See it? That's how you guys are. We are live now, right? Okay, no more jokes. Welcome to the August Human Affairs and Racial Conciliation Commission. I'm Jerry Harris, co-chair, and Jason Saccharin, co-chair, is online. And why don't we open with a moment of silence? Let's reflect on the mission and the charge to the commission, and let's get rid of all the negative influences that may have might have brought with us, and breathe in positive influence so that we may do what's in the best interest of the city. Okay. Do we have any members of the public who indicated a desire to speak? Okay. All right. We have the minutes of the July 13th meeting that was circulated. Are there any substantive corrections to be made? Moved and properly seconded. Note there are a couple of minor spelling errors that can be corrected, and we'll forward those. So the motion to accept the minutes with necessary corrections. Moved and properly second. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. And abstentions. Okay, so ordered. Welcome, commissioners. Jason, you have any comments you'd like to make?
I don't. I'm going to be listening. I apologize for being a little bit out of the loop. I'm still recovering from back surgery. So thanks, Jerry.
Okay. This has been quite a period of time. Quite a few things have been happening that we will need to catch up on. On our agenda this evening is a follow-up to our conversation about the light rail project, which Commissioner Seekings had indicated in our second or third meeting was a really great opportunity. We'll spend much of our time today dealing with that. Want to make a note to the commissioners. We have been meeting, that is Jason, myself, and Adrian have been meeting every 2 weeks, kind of an executive coordinating situation. And as we begin to do more work, there may be requests for information or priorities that you'd like to see discussed. And I would ask that one will make you aware of the dates and times of those meetings, but if there are things that you'd like us to add to those agendas, so that we'll have a line of communication through the co-chairs to the administrative coordinator, so we don't have 13 people asking Adrian to do things. Okay, as we move forward. Other than that, I don't have comments at this time. There are a couple of things I'll raise during open discussion. With that, we've invited Morgan Grimes, a communications outreach specialist for the Berkeley, Charleston, Dorchester Council of Governments, to give us an overview of the current activities, just as a historical context. Again, at our second and third meeting, Councilman Seekings identified this as a really great opportunity to make certain that the equity lens and questions of concern to the commission was focused on. We recognize that it is a 3-county situation. There is an interface between the light rail project and the city's peninsula plan that we need to follow up on. So this session is designed to get us up to speed. Carol, you have a...
I was just gonna say, as much as some of us would have loved to have a light rail, it's really a bus rapid transit
I'm sorry.
conveyance. Yeah,
I'm simply.
right.
Thank you.
Light rail.
Okay. So Morgan?
Thank you so much for inviting me and our LCRT and TOD project team here today. If those who aren't familiar, my name is Morgan Grimes. I'm the communications and outreach specialist for BCD COG, and I work specifically on the Low Country Rapid Transit project. So we do have a few different team members here today. I will just let everybody briefly introduce themselves just so we're all aware of who's in the room. Starting in the room here, I'll let Catherine start off and then we'll go virtual.
I'm Catherine Bash. I'm the planning director at governance.
And I'm Sharon Hollis. I'm the project manager for Low Country Rapid Transit. And Ranadeep and Andrew, do you want to introduce yourselves?
Sure, thanks, Sharon. I'm Ranadeep Bose. I'm a partner at SP Friedman Development Advisors. So we are part of the team selected by Catherine, Sharon, and Morgan to work on the TOD aspects. Primarily, our focus is real estate market analysis. We have an affordable housing assessment, which you'll hear from Andrew today. And then we're also doing some fiscal impact analysis. What's the property, the tax benefits of a project like the LCRT? So those are components of our scope, and we are part of a team led by Renaissance. Transfer to Andrew.
Sure. Good evening, everybody. My name is Andrew Glazer. I'm a senior associate at SP Friedman. Yeah, I'll be helping out this evening with a brief presentation on some of the affordable housing work we've done. But I'll give it back to you, Morgan, to get things going.
All right, thank you, Andrew. And then we also have Aaron Jameson on the call, I believe. Aaron, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Hi, Aaron Jameson with YBE Kennard, also on the team with SP Friedman and Renaissance, and here to support the community engagement aspects of the project and receive feedback from the community and other stakeholders. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So
Morgan,
yes.
I would ask you and your colleagues to be careful in using the jargon.
Got it.
Because we are not all literate. For example,
Really understand that.
TOD
Yes.
is transit-oriented development. So if you want us to hang with you and move
Completely
forward.
understand. Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Yep,
Thank you very much.
Yes, good point there. But I'll go ahead and kick it off just with a background of Low Country Rapid Transit. Do I need to click the... Okay. There it is, I think. All right. So just to give a background on Low Country Rapid Transit, what it is for those who are not familiar yet, it is high capacity bus rapid transit. As you see on the screen, here are the great benefits that you can see with having a BRT system. And they're seen all around the world. The goal is truly to connect the community to different resources. So as you see, it's a premium service. It's different than our current local bus service with CARTA. So this is going to have great benefits to help further that connection. One being that having the dedicated bus lane on Rivers Avenue, that's truly going to transform the region. So we're looking forward to having all these great benefits with bus rapid transit. And let's see, oh, I had it upside down. Thank you. I had it upside down, sorry. Like I mentioned, connectivity is the huge thing with this future BRT service. We're looking at running from the Ladson area all the way downtown Charleston. There will be that dedicated high capacity bus lane on Rivers Avenue. And so the blue highlighted area is where you can expect the bus to run in the middle of Rivers Avenue. And all station locations are close to resources. So healthcare, food, education, jobs. We wanted to strategically connect the community to all these places in a more rapid way. And so we're looking forward to having this connectivity in the future. One thing that we're excited for is just the opportunities along the line. And so thinking of transit-oriented development, and that's TOD, just thinking about each of these station areas, and that's what we're looking forward to talking with you all about today. As we look to plan and grow for the region, how can we do it in the smartest way possible? And so here are just some other benefits of the service. This will connect to CARTA, Tri-County Link existing routes. And then just thinking about that connectivity, how are people going to safely get to the station areas? And so these are the improvements that you will be able to see from Ingleside to Mount Pleasant Street, thinking about, how can people safely walk, bike, even drivers in their vehicles, how can they see those safety improvements on Rivers Avenue? And so we're looking forward to having these accessibility features along the line. And this just kind of goes into, like I already mentioned, the transit-oriented development study. And so just looking at how can people, work, live, and play along the station areas. We all know that the region is growing. And so we have to look at smart ways to preserve existing communities, make it walkable, mixed use, look at, how can other resources be implemented. And so I'll kick it off to the TOD team. But before I do, Catherine, I don't know. There's anything else to add here, or Sharon, before we kick it off to Andrew, but just explains TOD, what is it, what is it looking at, trying to put a lot of people in one place that is walkable and livable for the region. So this slide just covers an introduction into it. And then this is what we've done recently with TOD in this phase. We actually had a really great phase of workshops along the line. So we went to Reynolds Avenue, we went downtown near Morrison, we were in the northern part of Rivers Avenue, just talking with everyday community members and our stakeholders, talking about those specific station areas. What do they want to see in their communities? What do they want to protect in their communities? Looking at affordability challenges. And so this is what we've been working on with phase 2 and what we're excited for to continue with the study. And then this slide right here just talks about, how can TOD be as equitable as possible? Because we understand every station area is different. A station in the Ladson area is going to look very different than the North Charleston area and then downtown. So how can we be strategic and equitable and think about all the community members and, what matters to them during this process? And so with that, I don't know, before we kick it off to Andrew and Ranadeep, I don't know if there's any other comments from the COG side, but if not, then I'll go ahead and give it to you, Andrew.
Great, thank you. So the slides that we have today are a summary of some of the affordable housing work that we have done to date. I guess just for a little bit of context, we're talking about this great new LCRT system that will provide a massive investment in transportation, service and access throughout the peninsula and the region. And with that investment, there is should be some impact on the housing market surrounding the station areas and the entire alignment of the system. And so what we're trying to think about preemptively is what can be done to protect the existing affordable housing stock along the corridor, and what can be done to improve the amount of affordable housing throughout the corridor to, again, accommodate such a growing area, both population-wise, but also housing cost-wise. So to get things started, we want to tie the association of income to housing costs. So the area median income, the AMI, is the midpoint of household incomes in a region. So half of all households will earn more than the area median income and half will earn less. In Charleston, North Charleston area, the AMI is $87,500, and that translates into a maximum affordable home value of about $328,000. And on the next slide, you'll see that this 100% AMI area median income benchmark is used as the maximum threshold for most affordable home ownership programs. So households that earn up to 100% of the area median income typically qualify for those homeownership assistance programs. On the renter side, the 60% AMI benchmark is used, which translates to about $52,500 and a monthly rent of $1,300. So those are the two different ways of looking at housing costs respective to income and how we think about what is an affordable housing cost versus an unaffordable housing cost. Go to the next slide, please. When we talk about affordable housing, there's a couple different types of housing we're talking about. One is legally restricted affordable housing. So these are housing units that are contractually bound to be affordable. This restriction is generally associated with the subsidy that those housing units receive. So the low income housing tax credit is one, but most public sector assistance for housing comes with that legal protection of those units to maintain affordable. And generally those are provided to renter households. So again, it's that 60% income level of the area median income, that 52,000 value I just spoke of. On the other end of the spectrum, there's market rate housing, and that is privately owned, not affordable housing. Really the cost of those housing units reflect market value. But in between these two different buckets, there's what we call naturally occurring affordable housing. These units have no legal protections to be affordable, but due to factors related to age, condition, location, other factors, the rents or the values associated with those units are affordable. And again, we're talking about affordable. On the renter side, it's 60% of the area median income. On the owner side, it's households that earn up to 100% of the area median income. So those units are currently affordable, but they have no legal protection or any long-term guarantee that they will remain affordable. So that's a very important section of the housing market to focus on when preserving existing affordable housing. Go to the next slide, please. So here we'll look at just some of the recent trends in home sale prices. This is within the corridor, which is again that half-mile area around the alignment of the LCRT system that runs from the peninsula up to the county fairgrounds. Within the Charleston segment of the corridor, housing costs have grown by about 12% since 2018. In the North Charleston segment, the growth has been much faster, about 70%, although worth noting that the 2018 values are much lower than what you saw in Charleston. And that purple line in the middle, that reflects the maximum affordable home value for households that earn up to 100% of the area median income. So that purple line generally traces the divide between affordable and unaffordable housing costs. And we see the Charleston segment far surpasses those values. We're looking at the Charleston corridor, this segment of the corridor. It's really the peninsula and the neck we're looking at, which are, again, valuable areas that are typically associated with higher housing costs. But within North Charleston, the housing cost for homeownership units, at least, is increasing and is nearing that threshold value. So that's something to keep in mind as we think about the longer term play of preserving and providing more affordable units within the corridor. On the next slide, we're showing rent values, rent per square foot. Again, Charleston in 2022, about $2.80 per square foot. It's grown by 18% since 2018. Just to illustrate that a little bit further, if a household of three rents a 1,000 square foot apartment, 2 bedrooms, they're paying about $2,800 per month in rent, which is well above both North Charleston, which is about $1.52 per square foot, and then again the affordable trend line. And those values reflect the rents affordable to households earning up to 60% of the area median income. Worth noting here is that we see that the North Charleston rent values pre-2020 were fairly similar to that maximum threshold value, but since then there's been greater separation. The affordability gap has become more evident between those units in North Charleston and the maximum affordable amount. And so the longer term concern, again, with investment in this area and improved transportation access and the LCRT system is, again, the long-term protection and provision of affordable housing units to maintain existing populations within the corridor. Move on to the next slide, please. So looking overall in the corridor, there are approximately 24,900 housing units. 16,700 of those are renter units. 8,200 of those are owner occupied units. And within both of those buckets, it's somewhere between 4,700 and 4,800 naturally occurring affordable housing units. And so on this map, we've shown the areas of higher concentration of naturally occurring affordable housing units. Those are the units, again, that have no legal protection to be affordable, but currently are due to various factors. And so the darker orange areas are where the greatest concentration of those naturally occurring affordable units are. And you can see in Charleston, the peninsula, there's relatively low concentrations of those units. But as you move north throughout the corridor, the concentration of those naturally occurring units increases. We can go on the next slide where we'll look just at renter occupied housing units. That's at 16,750 units. About 4,000 of those are legally restricted units. Again, those are the units that receive some sort of subsidy or otherwise have a protection where the rent values are meant to be affordable at that 60% area median income level. This data came from the jurisdictions that we're working with that overlap the corridor. And then we use the available census data to estimate the number of naturally occurring affordable housing units and the higher cost units. If we look on the next slide, we'll show the distribution of how those units play between Charleston and North Charleston. So the legally restricted units, those that are sure to be affordable, 80% of those are within Charleston. Conversely, the naturally occurring units that have no protection but are currently affordable, over 80% of those are in North Charleston. So looking at from a different perspective, most of the affordable units in Charleston are protected. However, most of the affordable renter units in North Charleston are not. On the next slide, we'll switch looking at owner-occupied units. Again, there's about 8,200 of those units within the corridor. Currently, we don't have any data that shows legally restricted owner-occupied units. But we have, again, data from the census that we use to estimate the naturally occurring affordable housing count and the higher cost count. And we look at the break between Charleston and North Charleston again. On the next slide, you'll see that once more, almost 80% of the naturally occurring affordable units are in North Charleston, which again means that there's a large number of affordable units today that have no long-term protection to remain affordable. Move on. Back to this view of the corridor, we can see how the future alignment of the system and the station areas interact with these high concentration NOAA areas. So these are the places where either pressure for displacement or this new investment might increase housing costs. And therefore, it's important to think of strategies that can be used to protect existing affordable units and provide additional units in the future. So on our next slide, and the one following this, we'll look at some of the housing programs that we looked at in phase one of our work. That was a couple of years ago, starting in 2019, but we really looked at a larger toolkit of strategies that could be used to, again, provide more affordable units or protect the existing ones, different housing programs or regulatory options, zoning options that would allow different types of housing units that could be affordable, funding mechanisms to increase the supply due gap financing, to incentivize and ensure development of affordable units, and also capacity building within the public and private sector to think about ways to increase the supply of affordable units. But in phase two, on this next slide, we're really trying to advance 4 or 5 strategies that can be implemented by the cities and the county to specifically target the provision and protection of affordable housing units. So looking at grants or forgivable loan or low-cost loan structures that could support the maintenance or rehabilitation of existing naturally occurring affordable housing units. We're also looking into some of the incentives that exist in the city of Charleston today and their mixed-use workforce housing district. Basically, they'll allow developers to opt into a certain zone that provides unlimited density to build, but requires some provision of affordable units. There is also the option that developers can pay a fee in lieu of developing those on-site affordable units. And we were told that all but one developer has taken the option of paying the fee in lieu of building affordable units. So we're trying to look at what we can do to adjust that fee that might either increase revenues to build. The fees that are paid by developers are used to build affordable units offsite, or have the fee be at such a price that it would encourage developers to just go ahead and build those affordable units on site. And then lastly, looking at different funding mechanisms, there's tax increment financing, TIF districts that will capture the incremental property value growth of new projects, and those revenues, we've been told recently, are now eligible to be used to build or finance affordable housing developments. So that's one option. There's recent legislation around the accommodation tax, which allows jurisdictions to spend up to 15% of their accommodation tax allocation on the development of workforce housing. So that's a new revenue stream that can be explored, really what its potential is in both Charleston, North Charleston, and the county as well. And then lastly, there's the fee in lieu of taxes program. Generally, this is an economic development tool that's been used to attract business into various counties, but in Greenville, there's a recent project that utilized this tool to build or to gap finance to provide for the difference in development costs and what the developers pro forma showed their returns would be, or they could afford to build. This fee in lieu program was used to close that gap to build an affordable housing project in Greenville. So counties and cities in the state are trying to understand how this program can be used within their jurisdictions, and we'll be working to understand, again, the application of this project, of this program to affordable housing projects in the corridor. So that's just a high-level review of some of the work that we have done and will continue to be doing. But I'll give it back over to Morgan to talk more about timeline and some longer-term details.
Thank you so much, Andrew, for those slides. And just to close out, here is the timeline for Low Country Rapid Transit. We're currently looking at, right in our engineering phase, we're working towards 60%. So we should be finalized with that next summer for the project. And then construction will start around 2026, with the system likely opening around 2028, 2029. And here is just my information, as well as Sharon Hollis, the project manager. We thank you all so much for inviting us to come present about Low Country Rapid Transit and what we're currently doing in this phase of TOD. Happy to definitely take any questions at this time, but we also have our contact information up there if you would like to send us an email or just contact us with any further questions. Thank you all. Oh,
I do have a question.
yes.
This is Councilmember Saccharin. I just want to say thanks for you and the team coming in to present. Question for Andrew. You all mentioned a fee in lieu. Have you all got to a place where you've got that fee already ironed out, or you still, is that just a strategy you're thinking about using?
Yeah,
I can help. Oh, go ahead, Andrew. Yeah,
well,
go for it.
to fill in the gaps, but yeah, the city of Charleston has an existing fee that they apply to those projects, and we haven't yet really dug into some of the adjustments that could be made. We understand that the cost to build a unit is about $350,000, and I think the fee in lieu value is maybe closer to $50,000. So we understand sort of the existing gap between what a developer could pay into the pot versus what they would, have to provide to build those units on site, but we haven't dug in much further as to yet what we might think about adjusting to close that gap.
Thank you.
This is Bonnie. I am wondering how people find out about affordable housing and different programs they can qualify for, and how we can make the distribution of that information more equitable.
Yeah, so I don't know if maybe Sharon or want to jump on that, but
Yeah,
think-
Sharon, if you're on the call still.
I am, and I think that that's a very legitimate question, and maybe that's one of the gaps that we have. And I think it's certainly something that we need to talk about is how do we make this information available, easily readily available, and in a lot of different means, because not everyone has access to the internet all the time. And so I think that's a very legitimate question and something that we probably need to be thinking about.
Thank you. Oh, yeah, question.
I don't really have a question. I did just want to real quick respond to Bonnie, but thank you so much for being here. This every time I hear about this, it's just so exciting to look into the future and think that we're moving in this direction with all the opportunities that it's going to create. But Bonnie, I think the answer is that there isn't a way for people to find out right now. Posting Carrier has done some pretty good reporting on this, but also there's just not enough units that if we did put it out there in one central location, that it would help anybody because they'd already be gone. And so, I wish that that would improve the problem we've got, but the reality is we just need more units. I think this accommodations tax change is just so huge. I mean, I don't even know if the legislature knows how good of a thing that they did for us. I know Greenville's already working on it. I know the county is working on it. And I think that the city should be leading in that as well. So that may be a good thing for us to try to, take a look at how the city is using its accommodations tax money and try to think about maybe a more beneficial allocation or if we can even get up to that 15%, or if we need to take some time and, devote some this year and more next year and like that.
Yeah, thank you.
Work around it. So if you take that off the table, then you're kind of sort of sending this message that we are serious about affordable housing and there's no way around it. So we have to figure this out together. So is there a way to take that off the table? Does fee in lieu have to be an option?
It doesn't have to be in terms of the enabling legislation that, municipal jurisdictions have to establish voluntary concessions for doing stuff like that. It can't be required. Inclusion units are not legal under the state code. So they make it voluntary. I know that the city, when they first put in the voluntary program way back, they had limited success, if any success, in convincing developers to go ahead and take up the extra density that they would be given by including units. So they went along like that for a few years. And then I think it was our housing director, Ms. Shaw Johnson, who decided that something was better than nothing and that they were leaving a lot of opportunity on the table with the mixed use developments. And they went into a fee in lieu option. I think that we could certainly ask the housing department to take another look at whether the fees are in keeping with because everyone takes the fees. So it's obviously not that much of a problem to developers to use fees instead of building units. The other problem with building units is it's a finite number of years. So whenever the city uses the money that comes into the city's housing trust fund through the fees and other sources of cash, then they support housing development subsidies that have a much longer restriction period. I think the current MU that gives developers the opportunity to build included units, it ends at the 20th year. So that sounds like a long time until you've seen a development that goes on for 50 years and the last 30 years of its life are all profit taking. I think other cities that I've studied over the years are resigned to the fact that the fees in lieu are really the best way to, get some value out of mixed use development. But I do think it's been a few years now, maybe, I think it's been at least 3, if not more, and a lot has happened in terms of the housing market in those 3 years. So that could be a recommendation that we make to ask the housing department to come back with a new formula for, are we keeping up with the fee in lieu? I also, I really appreciate the presentation. This is the second time now I've heard you all, and it really rings true in the, it's the blessing and the curse of having the locations that are going to be where the stations are, and obviously most attractive to land investors, and will have the most, I'm expecting in every jurisdiction where there's going to be a station will be zoned for the highest density, right? That's going to be your recommendation for putting the stations in strategic locations where you could have that live work model of more housing with easier transit. So you don't, have people still driving in their cars to get to a station. And I do think that when we talked about that at the little Chambers Technical Committee, their Housing Coalition Technical Committee that you made the presentation to, you said that there was going to be a significant effort to bypass the neighborhoods that are traditionally single family and what you're calling NOAA districts, where they're naturally occurring affordable. Could you tell the HARP commissioners sort of that overall game plan to not disturb those kinds of neighborhoods?
Yeah, I can start off, and then Ronaldie or Andrew, if you have anything to add. And that is one of the things that we did hear in the community meetings, is the communities want to preserve those single family communities. So our recommendations will be centered around fixing up existing homes, if there's vacant lands, replacing with like in kind, and looking at ways to preserve and maintain that affordable housing, and really focusing the higher density, the multifamily in those commercial corridors along Rivers Avenue, right in the center near the station. And that seemed to resonate well with the community members that we did speak to. And of course, as part of what we're looking at in terms of the zoning and other recommendations that will go to the municipalities and the counties to ensure that message rings through to them. And Ronaldie, I don't know if you had anything to add to that.
I think you mostly covered it, Sharon. I think when we are looking at areas of change and areas where we would increase density, as you mentioned, those would be focused on underutilized commercial corridors and areas which are non-residential. So if it's if it's single family homes or full intact neighborhoods, we want to completely stay away from that. In fact, we want to preserve those so there's limited or no displacement that occurs. So and in fact, the goal we came up with on the naturally occurring affordable preservation fund, or some level of approach to a revolving grant or loan fund, was to actually provide grants or other mechanisms to allow homeowners to do improvements, but in return for a grant, they would keep those units affordable. That's one mechanism. If it's a grant, if it's a loan, then we don't do that. So there are some things that we are still researching, and both the county, city of North Charleston, all of them were interested in this sort of grant and loan structure, because it's about preserving existing stock along the corridor, and we're doing it in a very intentional way to limit or completely eliminate displacement.
Yes, thank you. I think that really, helps to know that it's not going to be a matter of pushing people out of their long-time residential neighborhoods. Maybe it would be helpful for y'all to have a slide that, sort of pinpoints the neighborhoods that are going to be most along the line, and not targets, not the right word, but focus on, in order to keep them affordable and preserve for the longstanding communities that our current residents or generational legacy residents. And I'm sure you've researched, the city now supports a program called they call it Common Cause here in Charleston. And it is just that. It's a program that works with existing homeowners. They are required to own and reside in their home for a certain number of years if they receive funding in order to do the repairs and the replacement and the rehab that is necessary to keep their house sustainable. So it's called Common Cause. The Charleston Redevelopment Corporation is a partner in that. The city cooperates, and the Historic Charleston Foundation is a big conveyor of funding for that. And it's underfunded, but it's getting off the ground as a pilot program that will generate a lot more grants we're expecting over the years. So maybe that's something that HARC could also look into and, plan on supporting in the public arena.
Go ahead. I guess 2 questions, 2 comments. And this may be premature, but have you thought about the route timing? I've actually, working for the census, been in a lot of the neighborhoods along those routes. And one of the things that I talk to people about, census and otherwise, is that the transportation, when you're dependent on public transportation, the number of hours in a day that adds to your workday can, by half again, just because you've got to catch a bus and then wait for the other bus. And so if the buses aren't coming, every half hour, and then it's a time of day thing too. If buses don't run on the weekends, but you work in food and beverage in the industry downtown, when you're working the weekends, but now the bus service is reduced. And this may be a little early for that because you're still in development, but I just wonder if you were looking at that yet.
Yeah, I'm happy to share some information about when the buses will be running. I don't know if I can go this way to get back to, might not let me go that way. I was gonna pull up one of the first 2 slides before the TOD slides. We just have some information, I believe, about the service hours, but it will run almost 24/7. It will be running on weekends as well, which will be great. Looking at the hospitality workers that need to, thank you. I think it's on this slide right here. That will need to get to work on the weekend. So it will be almost 24/7 Monday, to the weekend. It just will be shut down early hours for cleanup and maintenance. And so maybe like early hours, 3 a.m. to 5 a.m., something like that. But it will run every 10 minutes during peak travel times. And so looking at those times that, people need to connect to it and there might be some traffic along the corridor, every 10 minutes, the buses will be coming. And so this system, we're looking at people that, don't typically maybe work the 9 to 5, who maybe work later in the day or earlier in the morning, and just looking at how they can safely connect to the future transit system as well.
Yeah, and Morgan, a couple of things that I would add to that is that dedicated lane and what we're going to be using the transit signal prioritization, which is would have more of an impact in the peninsula area where we are in mixed traffic, will help to keep the bus moving faster, being able to avoid some of the traffic and stay on schedule, which adds to that reliability, because that's one of the challenges with buses operating in traffic is they are stuck in the same traffic as the cars. And in a car, you can deviate and take another route, but in a bus, it's pretty much on a fixed route. But the other thing we are doing, and we're actually, we have our first kind of study underway, is we're looking at the CARTA and the Tri-County Link routes as a whole and how they connect to these station areas. Because we know, 1, not everyone can walk to the stations, and 2, if the buses that connect to these stations aren't convenient to connect to this line, we won't get the ridership we need. So we'll be looking at CARTA as a whole. Our first deep dive right now is looking at the downtown transit routes. We have going on what's called the Downtown Charleston Transit Study. We have a public meeting this coming Monday night. It will be at the Visitor Center, so we can certainly share that information with you. But we're looking at what we can do to the Dash and the Express and the fixed routes for CARTA in the peninsula today to help serve some of these areas that are beyond where the current system operates. As the peninsula has kind of grown up the neck area, our service has not necessarily followed. But then we'll also be looking at how they can connect to these stations and to provide a more seamless connection between all of the systems. So it is an important part of the process, and we'll be working through those over the next couple of years.
Sounds great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Go ahead. I've got another one. The other thing that typically when you have ready access to a system like this, and it's funny how we're talking transportation, we keep coming back to housing. If you're living in one of these high density areas that we're now providing the transportation so you can get to work, that tends to elevate the value of the area, making the cost and affordability problem worse. And I don't know what to do about that. I don't know, but it's the kind of thing that I think it's best looked at now. And again, it's funny, we're talking transportation, but it keeps coming back to affordable housing. So that's why that has to be part of it. It's just the big overlap of the Venn diagram. And that's just a comment to think about.
Yeah, that's a great point. Sharon, did you have anything to add to that? I know that's a big part of, the TOD and its importance with looking at transit is looking at livability along these station areas. And so that's something that we're definitely keeping in mind with this study.
I could add to that, Morgan, if that's okay.
Yeah.
So I think that's a key question that we keep getting to. So there's sort of two simultaneous points. One, the point that you made up that you just mentioned, which is factually correct, and it's been proven out across the country that high quality transit does increase value. So it can exacerbate housing affordability challenges. But you also increase the supply of product because those areas become very attractive. And so you have the opportunity to increase supply. And using that, like what we are really trying to do is also, if you live close to a transit line, you reduce your two biggest costs, if it's affordable, especially if you're reducing your housing costs and you're reducing your transportation costs. And the way you could have reduced housing costs is if you have legally restricted affordable housing units along the transit line. So what we are hoping to achieve is two things. One is when new construction occurs along the corridor, we want to ensure a substantial share, potentially up to 20% overall of units being affordable, legally restricted. That is a challenge, but we are trying to get there. There is obviously a lot of existing legally restricted affordable housing, which we want to, at minimum, maintain and expand. So some of them are there are public housing units. Some of them are using the HUD programs, the low income housing tax program. So they are all existing legally restricted projects. So we are trying to do that. And then the naturally occurring affordable housing through this grant program or through other mechanisms, we are trying to maybe move some of them towards the legally restricted bucket as well. So the idea is preservation of existing NOAA and converting it potentially to some legally restricted. And then the second is when new construction occurs, we want to make sure we add more legally restricted. The challenge, of course, is that in Charleston, in the Charleston region, the 9% low-income housing tax, the tax credit is not, Charleston region is just not competitive for that in the state. It tends to go to more rural areas. So the cities and are sort of coming up with other gap financing funds, and maybe this accommodation tax that was mentioned and these fee in lieu programs and the housing trust that comes in out of that. All of those are sort of the gap financing opportunities for either mixed income on new market rate projects or what we call the 4% tax credit program, but with additional gap financings to make those projects feasible, because it's harder to make a project feasible with a 4% program. So we are sort of, when we are talking through these and working with the housing departments and the housing authorities, we're trying to cover all of these components, but we're aligned with the same idea that, hey, the transit is a good thing. We get more development, we get more units, and increasing supply is a good thing also for availability of units. But we are totally recognize this potential of increasing prices near the transit stations. And so the solution to that is just increasing the supply of legally restricted.
Thank you. Yes. With the housing, the 20%. Okay, I'll let Ronadeep or Andrew answer that. Let me know if you need me to advance the slide.
Could you just answer that, repeat that question? I just wasn't able to hear. I'm sorry.
20% goal that
Yeah.
you just cited for,
Yeah.
new housing units, 20% of them should be legally restricted. Where'd the 20% come from?
So it's basically there's no specific number that is there. Like, so this is mostly like a industry standard target that we look at. It's sort of in many cities, that's the goal and target in what they do. And because when you're doing 20% at 60% AMI for and for affordable, it's at 100% AMI. Those are common targets in cities across the country. So that's sort of the approach we've taken on that thing. I will say that the City of Charleston programs right now are lower than that. So the fee in lieu or the peninsula zoning gets you to like 10%. But the city is looking at just pure affordable projects as well. They finance that. So maybe we have some of those. We have specific sites along the corridor, like the Grace Homes public housing. We have Floyd Manor. The idea on some of those redevelopments, and there's publicly owned property over there, those properties, we want to increase the number of like pure, almost 100%, like maybe or 80% affordable on some of those. So the idea is to increase legally restricted overall by just building more legally restricted purely affordable projects, a very high share of affordable projects, as well as that the city programs that are there, which are mostly at that 10% level right now, which is another area we could recalibrate. Can you increase the share of legally restricted per the fee and lieu program or the peninsula zoning program? And so we are looking at any and all of those. The 20% number is just an industry benchmark and standard. We are not being able to commit right now that from a new perspective, you get to the 20%. We know just based on the data that we shared, though, that there is a pretty high stock of existing legally restricted. And you saw that in some of the slides, especially on the rental side, there is a very strong stock. So that's a good thing, because in the peninsula, this is an area which has a high amenity area. Being able to maintain at minimum is a key goal. And a lot of that existing legally are either public housing or it is housing maintained by not-for-profit mission driven. Not all of them, but a lot of it is what we found from the discussion with city and the housing authority, that they're mission driven developers. So those are not at risk over the, beyond the 2030 year to go away. And the city of Charleston, in the discussions we've had, especially on using the A-tax, accommodation tax program, they're looking at all kinds of mechanisms of just having more gap financing. And Ms. Johnson is a total advocate on the city side, and we've spoken to the county as well. They all want to have this corridor as a target area. So we are hoping that there is an opportunity to meet that 20% target here.
My second question is, you're in phase 2, specifically in the transit-oriented development. We are interested in being as engaged and informed as possible. What mechanism beyond this kind of presentation is there in place for us to engage? I mean, obviously, working with the city departments on this side, but I think there might, from the discussion, I'm hearing some very specific conversations. So how do we work more closely with you?
Yeah, I'm happy to start that response and then I'll let the team fill in. So I mentioned we had a great round of workshops recently with a lot of different stakeholders. And what we'll do is we'll actually be posting that on our website soon, Low Country Rapid Transit, and we'll have that information. And I believe we'll allow people to virtually do some activities as well. So looking at the maps and looking at, what specific areas in the community you would like to see change or, some opportunities there. And so that's just one in mind that I know we'll have on our website soon. But I know we will continue meetings with stakeholders during this phase. I don't know when the next round of workshops will be, but we're definitely happy to do one-on-one meetings with different stakeholders, make sure that our project team is able to hear what you all have to say about our plans. And then I'm sure we'll have some findings released next year where we can go into, compiling all that information and presenting some new information to the public as well.
Yeah,
I'll
I
let
think,
Sharon-
yeah, Morgan, what I'll add to that, of course, Morgan is your liaison for all things LCRT. So anytime you have a question or you need to have a meeting, certainly reach out to her and she can connect you to the right people. But I think there'll be various touch points throughout the project, and we do have kind of a corridor advisory committee. It's not a decision-making body, but it's one that we have touch bases with. We have representatives from city staff and housing and everything. So if there is a liaison from this group that would like to be included in those actual meetings and those touch points, we can certainly include that as well. But we do want to continue to engage as we go throughout the process and to make sure that the work we're doing is hitting the right places and moving forward. So certainly we're open to your suggestions as well as to what kind of touch points or how you would like to receive information and be engaged.
So thank you. If we could have this set of slides available to us. It also sounded like there might be specific site-specific, particularly in the peninsula, related information. So if we had those requests, we can make that up of your team and you can get us that information.
Yeah, that'll be great. Yep, I'll make sure Adrienne has my contact information and she's welcome to share that with you all. Just let me know any questions, or if you want to have those one-on-one meetings, we can definitely do that with you all. And I'll make sure I share the PowerPoint as well.
One other data set or map, do you all have would chart the all the paths and the sidewalks and everything that you put on the list for how many, miles of each category, so that we could see where, because one of the studies that was done by our predecessor group, the Special Commission on Equity, Inclusion, and Racial Conciliation's Housing and Mobility Subcommittee. So they studied mobility as, a major factor in the inequities and in a family's life. And if we could know that in the neighborhoods that we're most concerned about inside the peninsula in particular, that there will be more of that pedestrian biking ability, that we could be recommending that, more bike share goes to places and things like that.
Yes, so along the LCRT route, I know we do have some scroll plot images that I can definitely make sure you all see. It is our 30% design and we're working towards 60. So it's not the most updated, but I can share that with you. And it shows sidewalk, bikeway improvements along the line. In terms of in the neighborhoods along the line, I think this more so just focuses on the corridor.
Yeah, Morgan, I can kind of add what we have. So in phase 1 of this study, we did put together a station area, pedestrian and bicycle map of all the potential connections that were needed. In this phase, what we are doing is we're taking that and we're prioritizing what should be funded first, and we're using that with an equitable lens. And so we don't have that product ready yet to share. That's something that they've been gathering everything from the first phase, and we're working toward that. But our goal is to provide with both municipalities kind of a capital improvement program of prioritized bike and pedestrian facilities to start looking for opportunities to fund those. So we will be able to develop that as we go through this process. And we'll certainly keep this group engaged in that effort as well. But we still haven't really gotten into the weeds of that task yet.
That's great.
So I was trying to promise not to ask another question. Your transit-oriented development is focused on housing. Are there dimensions that have to do with commercial development? Because one of the advocacy is for minority, women-owned, and local generated businesses. Or is there data around that or incorporated into your planning?
Yes, Andrew or Ronnie, I'll let you all answer this response. So it was just asking if looking at business properties, you asked about the minority.
Business
women's-
development, sustainability.
Yeah, so is that a? Mhm.
Sure. So we have, and I think this is more on the Renaissance's team where they are looking into specific zones and areas where, something like Reynolds, there are specific corridors along this which intersect the main LCRT corridor that would be targets for minority business ownership. The in terms of our scope of work, it's more in the Renaissance group. We are looking at overall market potential, and from the business perspective of how do you manage that and what programs are there to ensure it's locally owned and locally managed, and specifically minority owned and managed. It's a lot to do with ownership. And so that is something that Renaissance is our other team partner is looking into. We are looking at market potential, and we have some strategies that we're going to collaborate with them on. So that is something that our partner is looking into.
Well, thank you. We could talk a lot longer. It sounds to me as we've got some good food for thought, and we should have a conversation amongst ourselves in terms of how we'd like to follow up. Thank you very much for the presentation, and thank members of the team.
Yeah, we appreciate the opportunity. Thank you so much.
So commissioners, I would propose that if we have some specific thoughts around whether it's zoning, fee structures, existing programs, that we share those. Carol, can I ask you to be the point in terms of receiving that information? And it seems to me we've already had some conversation with the planning department about the Peninsula Plan. So it seems to me that a next logical step will be to speak with them, talk to Mr. Jordan about affordable housing, so we can see how all this can come together. Okay. All right. Thank you so much. Again, park managers update.
Thank you, Morgan and team, again for that information. And I have some updates. So as far as Good Stock Consulting, we are rocking and we're about to be rolling because we have the contract in place. The refresher training for the equity core team is going to happen September 7th. That's going to be from 9:30 to 11:30, and that will be virtual. So that'll be a 90-minute training. So that 5-hour block, they're going to condense it into 90 minutes. Then we'll have a meeting that needs to be scheduled, which will be the joint visioning and the pre-strategic planning. That's when the two teams, HARC and the equity core team, will come together. That has to be 3 weeks following that September 7th, which will be September 28th. So that week of September 28th or the following week, which is the beginning of October, but I will send out a poll for your availability. So that'll come in an email next week, once I've already spoke to Good Stock. Following that is when we will develop our 1-year park plan development. That's with Good Stock. Also, what's been happening is with the Gullah Geechee Preservation Project. For those who don't know, it's a 2-year initiative where there was a $75,000 grant that came from the National Park Service, the City of Charleston, the Preservation Society of Charleston. They matched the funds, which they've been receiving some staff support from Charleston County and the town of Mount Pleasant. So the contact person for that is Chloe Stuber, but they have information sessions. Those flyers are in the Google Drive and they've also been sent to you in an email. They have a couple more sessions that are still in place, which is in North Charleston on Monday from 6 to 7:30, John Zallen, and the last that's on the flyer is a virtual one. So if you weren't able to attend any of them, the last one will be virtual. And then CPD racial bias audits. So there's a survey that's out. They're looking to increase engagement. There is one that is Spanish and English. And that survey is also on the HARC website under community engagement. And I have a couple of paper surveys, just if you want to grab one to look at, but they're also online. And if you distribute a paper one, it has to be back in and collected by August 21st. And as far as I know, there's been a lot of talk about the City of Charleston Peninsula Plan. After speaking with Chloe Stuber, they are in the pre-launch phase right now, and they're going to kick that off in September. And your Google Drive as well, as you will see if you're able to subscribe to what is called Plan Charleston newsletter. That newsletter will give all the updates on when the different phases are happening. I have that link as well. And then,
Google that, we should be able to subscribe.
well, the link is actually in Google Drive and in the email. I could resend it because it takes you directly to subscribing instead of Googling it. And there's also a network that's called the Low Country Black, which could be an opportunity for our History and Culture Subcommittee. This network is called the Low Country Black Cultural Network. I also have a link there for you in that document, and that's there are individuals from the Black community, community-based, faith-based, educational, public, and private institution. They wanted to make sure that the City of Charleston or no other institution owns it. So it's community-led, and this is to preserve the Black African-American culture, where they facilitate partnerships, support networking space, create community-led preservation, compile a shared database for Black and African-American historic and cultural resources, and cultivate opportunities for intergenerational engagement. So that could be an opportunity for our History and Culture Subcommittee. I am on the advisory board of that network. And it's just to give input where HARC may want to give certain input. Right now, they have slowed down a bit because the secretary, who was Kelly, worked at the Historic Preservation Society. She went to the City of North Charleston. Mm-hmm.
Tell us the name of that group.
It's called the Low Country Black Cultural Network. And they also have a website, and I have that on the document as well. So they brought up a website in July. And an update on the Racial Equity Core Team. So the last meeting, you know, that I distributed the Improving City Career Expansion Pipeline, supporting diversity leadership when it comes to the different departments in the city. The departments who actually have given input are Children, Youth, and Families, CPD, Cultural Affairs, Housing Development, HR, and Planning. And we know that it's just a very minute group, being that we have 17 divisions. So there were quite a bit who didn't contribute. I voiced that today in a department head meeting, along with also voicing that there is a DEI voiceover that I have in your Google Drive as well, because the city didn't have any resource when it came to where the city stand on diversity. The voiceover that I created with Monique Avery, who is the HR organization development coordinator. It's very basic, just an introduction to what diversity, equity, inclusion stands for. And so that resource is for city employees and it stands alongside the sexual harassment resource as well. And any questions?
So who sponsored the voiceover? Was that the core team?
No, that was my office,
Okay.
along with, the concern came when I onboarded, there was nothing was spoken of DEI or diversity, but there were other resources such as sexual harassment and, of course, disabilities.
Right, so it should be part of every employee's orientation.
Yes, and so that video, there is a video, that very introduction of where the city stands on it, but that voiceover
Mhm.
is a resource with senior leadership along with other employees.
Right. Has the department head group seen it?
Yes, so they have had groups to see it. Of course, I got the approval first from senior leadership. I can tell you just once. I could actually tell you who, and I'm gonna work on a spreadsheet. I had to pull this information of who's seen it. So those departments that are outstanding, that's what I was mostly concerned with. BFRC, which is business finance. So there's 31 outstanding, clerk of courts, 14 outstanding, executive 44, fire is 63, housing and community development 2, HR doesn't have anyone outstanding, IT 2, livability and tourism 5, parks 11, planning preservation 7, police 83, public service 12, recreation 100, stormwater 11, and traffic and transportation 7. But they also have until August 19th. So those are the ones who are outstanding as of now.
How do you know when they get off that list?
HR. So I'm checking in with Monique, who
Right.
is the organization development. Yes, because
Yeah.
she'll get the,
So I'm not sure that the commissioners have reviewed the voiceover that you talked about. So it would probably be a good thing for us to do that. And in the context of our discussion about the city's master plan equity framework, where there are those 3 or 4 questions to be asked whenever you're making a policy decision. It would be probably a good thing to have that language also incorporated into how we think about making decisions more broadly. It may be already incorporated in what it is that you've done, but it would be, I think, an interesting piece for us to consider.
Yeah, can we have that like a little presentation next month?
Yeah. Why don't we circulate it?
the voice over?
Yeah,
It's circulated. I put it in the Google Drive.
so what that tells you about Google Drive,
Right.
right? It's
Well-
like, I'm just, the notion that all of us have a bunch of stuff, right? We are saying that this is important for us to take a look at, all right? Let's do that. Okay, so if you recirculate it specifically and say, look at this, y'all. And then we can, and I'd appreciate folks to get back to me with any reactions or observations, okay? And then we can work through that. Good work, Adrian. Appreciate that. Moving on, if there's nothing else to updates, history and culture.
Tried to get to that, but unfortunately, that thing, but then the cousin gone good, had very favorable comments, so thanks for clarification.
So there was a discussion about monuments and placements of monuments held at Emmanuel. I'm understanding and talking to police night that a video of that may become available. If we get that, I'll try to circulate that as well.
We're talking about the one that was at night.
Mhm.
I mean,
Yeah, Friday night.
Yeah, I was there.
Anything else?
You had mentioned maybe getting a tour of the new museum.
Yeah, following at the tail end of after we adjourned last meeting, one of the things that we talked about is now that the International African American Museum is open, that it might be a good thing for the commission to visit as a group and have a walkthrough. Again, drawing on the fact that a former commissioner, Felice Knight, is the Director of Education and Outreach. We may be able to arrange for her to do a kind of a session with us. And I don't know if any of you saw because none of you guys are senior citizens. The Post and Courier had an article about the impact of the museum in terms of thinking about Charleston as it was and Charleston as it is, and a reflection, kind of a reflective piece. And I think knowing what the mission of the museum is to cause folks to think about stuff. So I think it would be good to try and arrange that. So Adrian, if we can have a conversation and see if we can get some dates where folks might be willing to do a tour, that would be great. Internal affairs, anything? Internal review? I know at our last meeting, we had a great we had a conversation about the conversation we had about the innovation units work, our interface with them in terms of data that they might be able to generate. Carol Fry is following up on that. Unfortunately, he had a flat tire, so he's not able to present in that regard. Nothing else on internal review. Adrian, you have anything on internal?
No.
Okay. And Adrian already reported on some aspects of the criminal justice racial bias audit activity. The project has been stopped as a result of some conversation about contractual matters that have to be resolved. Cajun and a number of organizations have raised questions in my conversations with people in the legal department and the chief. There's clearly a commitment to get the project back on track and completed as an essential kind of piece. I'm told that there's a meeting next week with all the principals, and we should get some information to follow up on that at that point. Any open discussion items? Anybody raise?
I just wanted to give a little positive update about our support for what we were calling the Renaissance District on the Union Pier. As we should know on the record, the Union Pier planning has been put into a whole new paradigm shift that now it's going to be a joint effort, coordinated, facilitated by the Riley Center, the College of Charleston's Riley Center, who is facilitating a new team that is going to be more collegial, engaging the community, that I think was very impressive to all of the city and state port leadership that, you know, are demanding a place in the planning for what goes on Union Pier. So it's basically a do-over in terms of they have the low master development that was put forward through the city's concept plan for technical review. So they've gone through that process. They're going to pick and choose components of that. For example, the stormwater and drainage and natural green infrastructure components that had been designed and put forward by the low plan will probably stay in place to every big extent. But other than that, they're going to sort of go back to square one, is my understanding, and incorporate goals and strategies that are important to the community. And one of those elements, I'm happy to say, SCASA Bernie Mazik has been able to put his ideas forward through the proper channels that are going to be part of that new planning process. So in the time since we supported the concept of a Renaissance district dedicated to Black businesses, he has had successful meetings in the planning department and the mayor together. And then most recently, he presented to Dr. Kendra Stewart, who is the director of the Riley Center and the key leader of how this committee forms and how a new master developer will be hired through the committee process. And he, at the same time that he was presenting his ideas about the Renaissance District to Dr. Stewart, she had invited Kenya Dunn, who was Alvin Johnson's right hand, number 2 chairperson of the the subcommittee for economic empowerment during the creation of our special commission report. So and Dr. Stewart told me this week that they were very impressed with the concept of the Black Business District. We know we can't be zoned for including only a Black business district of owners, but there are definitely ways that can be fostered legally through an overlay type zone or something like that we have smart people lined up to help work on the nuts and bolts of what that would look like. And I think the only thing that I would ask our group to support is Councilmember Gregory's request and idea that instead of just calling it a generic Renaissance district, which I think Mr. Mazik, said that he in his initial think tank who came up with this concept of right time, right place for Union Pier, started terming it the Renaissance District. But Councilmember Gregory thinks the one-of-a-kind, unique commerce history from the Black community historically was the mosquito fleet and the industry that they created of delivering seafood, And so I think the compromise, and Mr. Mazik said he didn't really care what they called it. Ultimately, he just wanted the thing to be in operation. So I support that agreeable, his agreeable way of incorporating good ideas. So I think we should be calling it the Mosquito Fleet Renaissance District as we talk about it, to get that name out there and really make that an ownership opportunity for the history of the mosquito fleet, which the port had already, decided that they were going to honor the fleet because they went in and out of that part of the shoreline for generations. But to make it something more robust than just a plaque in a park.
Comments? Good in order from listeners online. At the table. Seeing no hands, I have a question. I know that there is a discussion about a potential $70 million recreation bond before the city council. Public question, has that been finalized or is that?
I'm almost certain that the answer is yes, because I think the deadline to get it to the election commission has already passed. So I think
Okay.
if not, then we're doing it on Tuesday and it's
Okay, yeah, I think the 18th was the drop dead date.
I think it's already passed. If it hasn't.
yeah, if it did already pass, we did it already. If not, then we'll take care of it on Tuesday and that's moving forward.
Right, I'd urge the members of the commission to pay attention to that. Perhaps we should get some information. Again, the master plan speaks to questions of enhanced recreation facilities. And there's questions of equity, what's being done, where it's being done, and the like, and it, I think appropriate for us to at least be informed and have that discussion. Right, so perhaps on the next agenda, one of the items in the coming weeks, I mean, it's a November vote, so we either got September, or October, where we need to get and be informed about that. Okay, anything else to come before the body? Jason?
No, sir. Thank you.
Okay, a motion to adjourn is in order. Move properly second, all those in favor, aye. Those who don't want to, stay here.